All right, so what I want to do here is talk about the concept of a for loop in JavaScript. So this is basically going to follow the same logic of a while loop. It's just that we're going to bundle the counter, the condition, and the increment operation into one set of parentheses, okay? So let's start off with what we know. We know how to use a while loop. I'm going to start off with a counter. So I'm going to go let I equals 0. Again, I is traditionally used with loops. You could use J, you could use counter, you could use number, you can use whatever you want. Then I'm basically going to set up the while guy here. So type the keyword while with some parentheses. And inside the parentheses, you want to put your condition. So as long as this condition is true, so I'm going to say I is less than 5. As long as that's true, I want to perform the tasks or run the statements inside of this code block, right? Inside of the curly brackets. So I'm just going to console.log I in this particular case. You can put whatever you want in there. Basically, this is going to keep running as long as I is less than 5. So right now I is 0, okay? And if we don't do anything, we're creating an infinite loop, right? Because this is always 0. So every time it prints 0, it comes back up here and checks this. Is 0 less than 5? Yes. So it'll keep doing that forever and ever and ever. So to eventually break out of this, I'm just going to go I++. You can do this different ways. You could add 2 each time or 4 or 10, whatever you want to do, okay? Right now, I'm just going to keep it simple, and we're going to add 1 each time. All right. So basically what happens is first I is 0. So it checks and says, hey, is 0 less than 5? Yes. So this is true. So this is going to get run. First, we're going to console.log. In this case, it's going to be 0, right? That's the value for I. And then we're going to increment by 1. So now it's 1. So we say, is 1 less than 5? Yes, 1 is less than 5. So this is going to run. It's going to get incremented again, so on and so forth until a point where we basically have increased this to 5. And we say, is 5 less than 5? No. So this is false. So we're no longer going to execute the code here. Okay. So if we run this in the console, we know we would get 0 through 4. So let's pop open the terminal and run this. And we get 0 through 4. Okay. There's another way to do this that's a little bit better. So I'm going to type the keyword for, and I'm going to put my parentheses here, okay? And I'm first going to declare a variable using let. So I'm going to go let I equal to 0, okay? Now you might be saying, well, you have let I equal to 0 up here. This guy is going to be local to this block that I'm going to set up. So I'm going to end up with these curly braces. And basically this guy right here is not going to affect this guy. This is on a global, okay? And this one is not. This is local because I'm setting up a block. So let I equal 0. And then the next thing I'm going to do is put my condition. So we have this I is less than 5. So I'm just going to do that again. So I is less than 5. Okay. Notice you have a semicolon after each of these guys. And lastly, I'm going to do my increment operation. So I'm going to go I++. So basically this part right here is what do you want to do once you've executed what's inside of the code block here. Okay. So it's basically going to do the exact same thing as this. It's a more, I would say, compact way or an easier way to manage the parts of a loop. So that's why the for loop is so popular. So first, again, we declare the variable I, we set the initial value to 0. So that's done first. Then we check. So we say, is 0 less than 5? Yes. So we're going to run these statements inside of here. Okay. And then when that's done, we're going to do this operation. In this case, it's going to be, we're going to add 1 to our variable I. So let's go ahead and just console.log I, okay? And again, we're just going to see 0 through 4. So let's pop this open and clear this and run this. And we get 0 through 4 from the first while loop and then 0 through 4 from the for loop. Now, there's a couple things you need to know, and we'll get deeper into this as we go along. Let me get rid of this real quick. First and foremost, you don't want to use const here, okay? So if you use const here, you're going to have an issue. So if we pop this open and clear this and run this, you have a problem, right? So basically, it's going to tell you that you have assignment to a constant variable. So you can use var if you want to, but I suggest you use let. And then basically you will not be able to access this I guy outside of this. Remember, this is a block level scope. So if I go console.log, let's say the I variable here, you're going to have a problem. It's going to say I is not defined. So let's go ahead and clear this and run this. And you're going to see reference error, I is not defined. Okay, so let's get rid of this. You can use const inside of here. Okay, I'll have to explain this later on because it's a bit detailed. But let's say I did something like const, and I'll say my current I, something like that, or maybe I'll capitalize it. Let me keep it lowercase like this. And I'm just going to set that to the current value of I. Okay, and then I just console.log my current I. You're going to get 0 through 4 again. So let's pop this open and clear this and run this, and you get 0 through 4. So some of you might be thinking, why can't I use const here, but I can use const here? This is a bit advanced for this at this point. Just understand that you can do it. You can use const inside, but you can't use const here. Okay, I just want you to know that. And then when we get to advanced JavaScript, I'll start explaining the details. Okay, so let's wipe this out. and do just a few examples, some simple stuff. I'm just going to focus on some simple math stuff. And then the last example, I'll loop through an array. Okay. So I'm going to start with basically determining if a number is even or not. Okay. So you should know from math class that a number is even if it's divisible by 2, meaning I take the number, I divide it by 2, and there's no remainder. So let's say I did something like 10 divided by 2, that's 5, no remainder. Okay. If I did 9 divided by 2, that's 4 with a remainder of 1. So 10 is an even number because it's divisible by 2, and 9 is not an even number because it's not divisible by 2. So 9 is an odd number. So let's go ahead and say 4. Okay. We're going to go I'm going to stick with the I equals 0. Okay. I'm going to do I is less than, let's just go ahead and do 11. Okay. So this is going to go through the first 10 numbers. Well, actually the first 11 numbers, because it's going to start at 0 and go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you can also do I is less than or equal to 10 if you wanted to do it that way, but I typically do it this way. So I'll do I is less than 11. Okay. So then I want my semicolon here, and then I just want to go I++ here. We'll talk about other ways to change this after the loop is run. For right now, we're just basically increasing by 1 each time. Okay. So I want to do a little if statement, and I'm just going to ask if I basically divided by 2, if the result of that, if there's a remainder, right? So I can say with my remainder operator, the I with the remainder operator and then 2, does that triple equal to 0? So basically, if I'm dividing it by 2, is there a remainder or not, right? If there's not a remainder, you just get 0, right? Because there's no remainder. So in this case, I know that the number is even, so I'm just going to console.log. I'll use my backticks here and say the number, and then $ curly braces, I'll just do I, is an even number. Okay, so let's just stop for a moment and run this with what we have. Clear this. And let's run this, and you get 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Remember, it just goes by 2. So 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So 0 is an even number, so is 2, so is 4, so is 6, so is 8, so is 10. Again, because if you divide any of these numbers by 2, you don't get a remainder. Okay, so let's pop this open, and let's go ahead and do else. I'm just going to say console.log, basically, the number, and then $ curly braces with the I inside is an odd number. Okay, that's all we want to do. We put my semicolon there to be consistent. So clear this and run this. So now basically you start with 0, it's even, 1 is odd. And again, it's just going to alternate. You get even and then odd and then even and odd, so on and so forth. Okay, let's talk about another concept. And I'm just going to wipe this out each time, even though we keep typing the same thing, just to get a little practice. But I want to talk more about this remainder operator because I feel like a lot of people do not fully understand it. So you should understand that if you divide a number, let's say an integer, something like just 5, or even if you did 5.0, okay, with just straight after the decimal point, just all zeros. If you divide that by 1, you just get 5. There's no remainder. So if I do something like console.log, let's say 5, and then I'm going to use my remainder operator with 1. The remainder from this division is 0, right? 5 divided by 1 is 5, no remainder. So let's pop this open and run this. We get 0, right? Even if I did 5.000 like this, it's still going to be 0 as a result, right? There's no remainder. JavaScript does not have a distinction between a decimal number and an integer. Everything's just number. Okay, so this in the end is just 5. Okay, so let's get rid of this and let's put something like 5.359. So what do you think is going to happen now? Well, basically, even though you divide a number by 1, you say basically the number's unchanged, JavaScript is going to consider this decimal part, this 0.359 as the remainder. Okay, so if I pop this open and clear this and run this, I get 0.359. So what I'm getting at here is we can use this to decide if a number is basically an integer or a decimal number, basically a decimal number in the terms of having something after the decimal point that's not 0. Okay, if I put 5.0000, that's really just 5. It's just an integer. Okay, so this is one way you could do this. Another way that you can do this, let me get rid of this part right here. Well, I need the console.log, so let's put console.log in again. You can type Number.isInteger, okay? And inside of there, you can type what you want to see. So if I do the 5.359, this is going to be false. If I do console.log, Number.isInteger, let's do 5.00 like this. That's going to be yes or true. And let's do console.log. Let's do Number.isInteger again. And let's do straight up 5. Okay, so this one's going to be false, right? Because you have not an integer, but basically a decimal number. This one, the 5.00, again, if the numbers after the decimal point are all zeros, it's really just 5. And this guy is straight up 5. So let's go ahead and pop this open, clear this, run this. You get false, true, and true. Okay, so let's use this and do a little exercise here. Basically, we're going to think about a perfect square and a perfect cube. So this is more math that we have to think about. So if I square a number, let's say I squared 2, the result is 4. 4 is considered a perfect square, okay? Because it's the result of squaring some integer. Now, if you take something like, let's say 2, and you cube it, that's going to be 8, right? 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. So 8 is known as a perfect cube because it's the result of cubing a number. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to set up my for loop. So for let I equals 0. I'm going to go I is less than, let's do something big. Let's do 1,000, okay? And then I'm going to go I plus plus. So what I want to know is I want to know which numbers, basically starting with 0 and going up to 999, are perfect squares and perfect cubes. Okay, so both. So something like 64, where 64 is 8 squared and it's also 4 cubed. And then also, I want to know if it's not a perfect square and a perfect cube, is it just a perfect square or is it just a perfect cube? Okay, so let's go ahead and do something like if. I'm going to first ask if math.square root, okay, of this I. So basically, I'm taking the square root of, in the first case, it would be 0, okay? I want to put the remainder operator with 1. Does that triple equal to 0? Again, that just tells me that the result here is going to be an integer, okay? If it is, then I know it's a perfect square. Then I can go and, okay, I can go math.cube root, okay? And then the I, I'm going to do the same thing. So the remainder operator with 1, triple equals to 0. Now you can use the Number.isInteger. I'll mix that in a second. I'll show you both ways. So what I want to do here is just console.log, and I messed that up. So console.log, and then some backticks here, and I'll say the number, $ curly braces I, is a perfect square and a perfect cube. Okay, so that's all we want to say. So let's pop this open and run this guy. So you get 0, 1, 64, and 729. So 0 you could get from 0 squared is 0, 0 cubed is 0. 1, the same thing. 1 squared is 1, 1 cubed is 1. 64, you got 4. That's cubed, that gets you 64. And then 8 squared is 64. And then 729 is 27 squared. And it's also 9 cubed. Okay? So that's those guys. So let me go ahead and clear this now. And let me minimize this. Let's put some other guys in here. So basically what I would do is an else if. So I know it's not a perfect square and not a perfect cube at this point. So let me check to see if it's just a perfect square. So I did my else if. I'm going to go math.square root of I now. And let me use the other way. So let me go ahead and say number with a capital N dot is integer. So let's wrap that guy. Okay. And if this is true, that this is an integer, the number here is going to be a perfect square. Okay, so what I want to do here is just console.log with some backticks, the number, $ curly braces I, is a perfect square. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. And then I'm going to go else if. I'm not going to do else because there's numbers that obviously would not be a perfect square, would not be a perfect cube, and would not be a perfect square and a perfect cube. So something like 7, right? It's not a perfect square, not a perfect cube. Okay, so else if, I'm going to go math.cube root, okay, of I. And again, we can do the remainder operator with 1. Does that triple equal to 0? If it does, then I know I've got a perfect cube. If it doesn't, then I don't. Okay, so basically here, I would console.log. I would go the number, $ curly braces I, is a perfect cube. Okay, so that's all we want to do there. So let's go ahead and pop this back open, clear this and run this. And you get all of these. And it does it instantaneously, but you have to go through all of them. So I'll let you read this on your own. Basically, you have 0 and 1. And I think it was 64 and then 729. That's both a perfect square and a perfect cube. And then the other ones you should be familiar with, at least the perfect squares. So 2 squared is 4, and then you get 3 squared is 9. You get 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25, so on and so forth. And the first few perfect cubes, if you get to 2, 2 cubed is 8, and then 3 cubed is 27, so you see that one there. And then 4 cubed is 64, but that's again going to be both. And then 5 cubed is 125, so you got that there. Okay, so on and so forth. I'll let you read those results on your own. Okay, let's do one more example. I think it's important for us to understand that we need to be able to loop through arrays and do things. Okay, so we've seen this with the while loop and the do while loop. We have something now, an array method called for each, which you're going to use a lot in place of this. But the old school JavaScript, this is how we went through arrays. So for, you're going to let I equal 0, okay? And I'm going to say I is less than. In this case, I'm going to call my array store inventory, okay? And I'm going to put dot length, okay? And basically I want to go I plus plus. So again, we have the for each method now that's going to do this in a much more efficient way, but there's still some times where you need to loop through arrays for certain things, and we'll get to that later on. So let's go ahead and put an array up here. I'm gonna go const store inventory, and let's just put some items at the store. Let's just keep this really simple. I'm gonna go bread, and I'm gonna go rice, and I'm gonna go chicken, and I'm gonna go, let's say corn. I didn't misspell that, so corn. And then what else do we have in our store? Let's go steak. Let's go cereal. Okay. Let's go milk. And that's good enough. We have enough to see what we're going to do. So let's put this up here and put a little semicolon here. And all I want to do is loop through this guy. So again, starting I with 0 means if I did something like console.log, let's just say I did store inventory with I there. Well, again, I is 0 at this point. So just like if I said store inventory with 0, and that's going to give me bread, right? The index there is 0. Then we increment by 1, so we're going to get to rice, then chicken, then corn, so on and so forth. Now again, you see this length property here, this store inventory.length, it's used all the time. And we can say less than specifically there because, again, the length is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the length is 7, but again, because this starts with 0 in terms of the index, the last item is going to be 6, right? So when I gets to 6, store inventory with 6 there, that's going to be my last item, right? This is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 in terms of the index. So it's going to work out perfectly because when this gets to 7, we're done, right? If I did store inventory with 7 there, you would get undefined, so you don't want to do that. So let's go ahead and pop this open, clear this out, run this, and you get all your items, right? It just loops through it for you. Again, we'll see a better way to do this with for each. Let's just clean this up a little bit, make a little message. So we'll just use some backticks here, and we'll say we sell, and then $ curly braces. I'll put this guy in here at our store, okay? Just to make it a little bit better. So let's pop this open, and I forgot my period, so let me put that in. And let's clear this and run this, and we just get, we sell bread at our store, we sell rice, you know, so on and so forth. It's just another way to kind of loop through an array. We saw this with the while loop and the do while loop, and now you can use the for loop. And here shortly, I'll show you how to use the for each method.